Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I've got a video for you about the Battlefield community's reaction to Battlefield 2042 because I don't think I have ever seen a bigger bunch of crybabies in my entire life. I feel embarrassed for that community and I'm not even really a part of it. Of note, today's gameplay isn't mine. This is J-Hub's gameplay. I think he's playing on medium settings 1080p. I have managed to re-injure my hands again, so I could not get my own gameplay for this video, though I have been playing Battlefield and I've been watching streams and learning as much as I can about this game because I'm of the opinion that it's pretty good. However, when I shared that opinion in my video review, I was surprised to see the sheer volume of negative feedback rolling in, mostly from the Battlefield community, and I thought, okay, you know, maybe I'm a COD guy posting Battlefield, maybe they're salty, maybe that's just YouTube. YouTube comments are kind of wild, right? So I went to the Battlefield subreddit to pop in and see what's going on, and it's nothing but very negative and toxic memes all the way down the page. Complaints about the guns, complaints about the movement, complaints about the graphics, complaints about the squads, just this is the worst Battlefield, you killed Battlefield, you butchered Battlefield, I'm doing a refund on my pre-order, this is the worst, and just memes all the way down. And I'm like, okay, well, you know what, maybe that's just Reddit. Let me check Twitter. Twitter's a cesspool, TikTok's a cesspool, other YouTube videos are all super negative. But what's weird is that I've noticed that the vast majority of this absolute hate is coming from the Battlefield community itself. The Battlefield community seems to genuinely and truly hate Battlefield 2042 on an existential level, and they're behaving like children worse than any gaming event that I can remember since David Vonderhaar nerfed the DSR back in Black Ops 2. This is, I'm gonna say that I feel embarrassed for the way this community is reacting, and I'm a member of the COD community. Let that sink in. The Call of Duty community, that's a whole giant army of clowns, and they're behaving more maturely about Call of Duty Vanguard than the Battlefield community is about Battlefield 2042. And I hate to tell you guys, but Vanguard is in a much worse shape in almost every single way than Battlefield 2042 is right now, and the COD community is taking it like champs. I mean, I get on the subreddit and they're talking about going back to Battlefield 5 and talking about how Battlefield 5 was like a perfect game, and I just start shuddering in fear thinking about how buggy and unplayable it was at launch. Or they're talking about Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 4, and I hate to tell all of you guys from the Battlefield community that have tuned in to watch this video because YouTube is doing this sort of like outrage-based engagement thing that algorithms love to pump you guys with, but Battlefield 4, 1, and 5 were all flops as far as I'm aware, all financial flops. Now, Battlefield 1 being the best of the group, had an initial hype, and then the player base died insanely quick. Battlefield 5 launched in a nearly unplayable, infinitely crashing, buggy, can't join your friends kind of state. Battlefield 4 launched in an even worse state and took almost a year to become good and playable again, and I don't think any of those games made much money, if any, and Apex Legends was probably more profitable to EA than all of them combined, which is why they brought on people from the Apex team to help improve Battlefield 2042, because Battlefield fans out there, those of you that are already mad at me, if this game flops, that just might be the end of Battlefield in general. EA's not going to keep paying for a franchise that doesn't make money, and we're going to go over some stupid things the community's playing about, but before I just dive into that and eviscerate some stuff, I do want to say that there are legitimate problems with Battlefield 2042. There are things the community should be complaining about. For example, it's not in a very optimized state right now in the beta. I'm lucky that at least on my end it doesn't crash or bug out or do crazy things too often, but I don't get very good frame rate for having an RTX 3090. A lot of people that I know aren't getting, you know, very impressive frame rates on any card. It's not really able to crank 120. Most people are running between 60 and 80, and that's kind of rough. That's not a good thing. I think the specialists in general are seriously lacking in balance and playability and interest. I mean, the grapple hook just kind of dominates everything, and because of this, you have some potential severe class balancing issues that lessen squad play. For example, there's a real lack of medics in this game. There's a real lack of ammo bags. Why? Because the grapple hook and having a rocket launcher or anti-air is just better than having all of that, and even if you play a medic, you can't revive people because you just pick up their items off the ground. It's very stupid. I don't think the new spotting system, or really lack thereof, is the best thing for Battlefield. I didn't include that in my original review because I've had more time to play and get more experience with it now, and I honestly just kind of prefer old Battlefield spotting. The FOV scaling is bizarre because it's doing the vertical field of view instead of the horizontal, so the numbers don't make sense or translate to any game. There's like input scaling that doesn't really make any sense, especially if you're playing on controller. There are some controller and button issues that are very overwhelming, and there's some like general bugs and glitches and things that don't work in the game, especially visual ones that could be fixed. Another big one is that all of the operators look the same, the specialist or whatever, so you can't really tell who you're shooting at sometimes if they're not pinged, and the new spotting system doesn't make that particularly easy. There should be different looking operators if you're playing on the other team instead of just trying to, like, I shoot friendlies all the time. That's a real problem. Now, people on Reddit will say that's a real problem and then go on for hours about how they look like clowns or how they look not realistic or they wear purple gloves or this camo doesn't match or some pitiful little neckbeard thing like that, ignoring the real issue that it's confusing when you can't tell your enemies from your friendlies. But on to my criticism of the Battlefield community, which has always gone so well for me in the past. So many threats from that. But anyway, a big one that confused me is the complaints about the gunfight mechanics. The Battlefield community is pretty firmly of the belief that the gunfight mechanics in Battlefield 2042 are just way too simplified, too dumbed down, and too codified, that they have butchered classic Battlefield gunplay. And that's true in the sense that they did butcher the gunplay. They made it a lot more simple, they made it a lot easier to do, and they did specifically, very obviously, make it much more CoD and Apex-like, but that was done on purpose, and that's because past Battlefield games have not had good gunplay mechanics for the most part. And I know that's like blasphemy in this house here, but just hear me out on a couple of points, okay? Battlefield weapons, rifles, pistols, snipers, everything, all operated at about 1/3 to 1/4 of their real-life bullet velocities, or less if you consider how the game doesn't have exact physics units and scaling and all of that. And I've shot plenty of guns in my life, from basic hunting to full auto target practice to like range training and stuff, clay pigeons, all that kind of thing. And never in my life have I shot a 5.56 rifle and had to like just watch my bullet go across like it's an arrow or something. Like, the bullet velocity in previous Battlefield games is lower than crossbow velocity in Call of Duty games or throwing knives and stuff like Valorant or whatever. And that's ridiculous for a bullet. Then on top of that, Battlefield always kind of had this really tight and effective hipfire, which at least in the case of Battlefield 1, it was almost always better to just hipfire people than actually aim down sights, so you just run around spraying with hipfire, which isn't really great for like an advanced shooting mechanic. Then when it comes to the shooting mechanics, you have a lot of stuff that CoD has. You know, you've got your gun shake and your recoil, and it's worse when you're, you know, spraying full auto, but there's additional mechanics on top of that that are very rarely explained in game, in the tutorials or anything. It's more like one of this Valorant or CSGO style where you just have to learn it and get good kind of things, which very few people really did. Those mechanics, namely being three things. Number one, that even when you aim down sights in Battlefield games, at least the old ones to the best of my understanding, it was still just a hipfire box, and what it would do is tighten that hipfire box up stupidly tight, like kind of what you would see in modern Fortnite. And as you continued to fire fully automatic, your hipfire box would get wider around the scope that you're aiming down sights with. Then you would have recoil penalties. The longer you hold down your fully automatic fire, the more recoil you would get and the wider the box would get. And then finally, there was another mechanic that would punish you for moving while shooting. It would give you more inaccuracy, because that's real life. And I have to give Battlefield credit, that's realistic. I've fired full auto weapons while trying to move. It's not easy. The recoil is really bad. It's really hard. Now, submachine guns I can host, you know, targets with, like a rifle, a 5.56, a 7.62 full auto, probably not the most accurate thing in the world. However, when it comes to gaming, those mechanics weren't explained. So if somebody would see an enemy at, I don't know, like 50 meters, which in real life is absolutely like death range, they would aim down sights, put that target on them, and unload. And after the first couple of shots, even if you were perfectly tracking with that red dot, your bullets could go sideways. They could do all sorts of bizarre stuff. You would have to lead your targets at as little as 25 meters, which again, in real life, bullets are like instant. They might as well be lasers or hit scans. And so many other mechanics that just are not explained that make it very hard to use your weapons in full auto or at long range. Now, many of you will argue that is a skill that you need to learn, that you need to learn these things and you need to master these things. And that's true. That is a skill to learn. It adds a skill gap. It makes it a little bit more of a competitive game, but Battlefield's not a competitive game. Battlefield's not Overwatch. Battlefield's not Valorant. Battlefield's not Rainbow Six Siege. There's no ranking system. There's no elo. There's nothing. It's like just giant big team battles in Halo where people are slamming vehicles and helicopters into each other, and you don't need all of these really advanced mechanics. Mostly because about 90% of the people that are playing it are casual, and they will never, ever, ever learn any of this stuff. whereas the more recent Battlefield mechanics have simplified all of that. The invisible hipfire box or whatever it is like way smaller now. Bullet velocity is way faster. It's kind of COD-like, to be honest. The overall recoil is actually a little bit higher, like the visual like kick up. I've seen some comparisons on Reddit. It's a little bit higher than past Battlefield games, even though people are saying they're lasers, but the additional inaccuracy you get from your hipfire box getting bigger and the scaling kick isn't no longer there. So the guns in this game feel a little bit more COD or Apex-like, and that's designed on purpose. You could see the same thing happening in Battlefield 5. They've just continued to enhance it here. And the reason they've done that is because guns in those games have broad appeal, even if they're not realistic, and that's a very generous term for these kind of games. They operate in a way to where everything on the screen gives you the feedback you need to shoot your target. There's no unusual mechanics. There's no invisible mechanics to learn. There's no your bullets coming out sideways. There's nothing, I sprayed that guy and my bullets didn't hit. That's kind of weird. You know, we're not playing Tarkov here. We're playing basically big Call of Duty. So I think that having these simplified mechanics mean that people that come in from Apex, people that come in from Call of Duty, people that pop in from any number of shooters, Fortnite, whatever, will understand how the guns work and be able to play the game, enjoy the game, sell more copies, sell DLC, and keep the player count high and the game and the franchise successful. Making it really arbitrarily complex and hardcore is not only a little bit bizarre from a shooter, especially like a milsim kind of shooter, but it pushes players away. The Battlefield community, however, doesn't seem to understand that. A lot of them just kind of want to be elitist and think that it should all be like ultra hardcore, kind of like how Battlefield was 1,000 years ago in the Paleozoic era, but it shouldn't. It should appeal to more people. The next thing is they're complaining about the movement. Oh, the movement it's too fast. You can knee slide and there's zip lines and you can climb this and the grapple hook and blah, blah, blah. I hate to tell you guys, but games that have moderate movement speeds are very successful. Slow-paced games have their own niche. They do pretty well. They're moderately successful. You can look at Siege, for example. Super fast-paced games like Lawbreakers or Hyperscape or whatever Quake-like games where you basically fly tend to be too much for people. However, games that are kind of in the middle, like Apex Legends, where it's manageable, where Warzone you have a lot of, you know, kind of movement stuff, but you're still a human soldier and you're doing reasonable things. Those games are successful because they're snappy, they're responsive, people can do the things they want to do, they don't feel limited or handicapped, and that's not something that Battlefield has had in a long time. Now, Battlefield 5 had some, it had more climbing and mantling and moving, but you can go back to these games that people love, Battlefield 1, Battlefield 3 and 4. The movement is relatively simple, clunky, and slow, but not in a good way. Battlefield didn't have really smooth, fluid movement. You had to really set up to do your engagements. You didn't have the opportunity to react and outskill people. Well, they fixed that, but now the community's mad about that. Don't Apex my Battlefield, they said, but they're doing that simply to have more people interested in it. Another one I think is profoundly stupid is I keep hearing the graphics are bad. Now, this may be a disconnect between consoles and PC, or more specifically, last-gen consoles. I have seen some previews of last-gen consoles, and the graphics look somewhat reasonable, but at least as far as Reddit is concerned, that's a very PC-dominated community, and I see people complaining about the graphics on PC, and I honestly think you all have rocks in your head. Battlefield has great graphics. I will admit that they're not super complex graphics. I have personally happened to like the aesthetically clean look. For example, I really liked Halo Infinite because the graphics that they had were good, they were functional, they were colorful, and they were aesthetically clean. There's not smoke everywhere, there's not dust everywhere, not everything's on fire, there's not lens flares blowing me out, and volumetric fog and water, and like absurdly complex trees and foliage that eat up all of my GPU resources. Those kinds of things aren't present in Battlefield 2042, and I think that's a good thing because I can actually see what I'm doing, I can actually see what I'm playing, and these other kind of things aren't necessarily enhancements for the gameplay. Having a visually clean game only makes the gameplay better, and you don't need to crank absurdly complex graphical options, especially when it's already not in a good optimized state. And if you think this game is ugly, that's insane. I mean, the map that I played looks great as far as I'm concerned. I'm not super discriminant on graphics. The other maps, the other previews with the snow map and like the Shanghai City or whatever look even better, honestly. I can't wait to see how awesome those look. It's already doing RTX and other things. So I have no idea what you're talking about a bad looking game. I mean, I'll admit some of the animations are simple. They recycle them. God, Call of Duty's been recycling animations for a decade now, so that's not super surprising. But there's nothing inherently, it's not like it's blocky and choppy and ugly and stuff. There's a little bit of pop in here and there, but hopefully that'll be fixed somewhat soon. The community is complaining about the maps being too big, and I will admit this is a point that does have some merit. There is some running simulator aspect to Battlefield 2042 if you spawn in the wrong point, but you can always redeploy and respawn somewhere else. It doesn't make that big of a difference. However, big maps are kind of the point of Battlefield. Battlefield going all the way back to like 1942 or 1943, the game, not the year, have always had really big maps with lots of running and exploration and slow downtime and stuff. I mean, those maps would be small compared to today's maps, but they were absolutely ginormous then. And this isn't anything different. Like if the maps were small, the community would be mad. I will say the map we're playing, Orbital, has some kind of slow areas, some down points, some areas that aren't exciting. I think instead of playing Conquest on Orbital, I would rather play, oh my god, I forget the name of the mode even, but there was a mode in Battlefield 1 where you would have to like push the enemy and take them like sector by sector, and you would have all these choke points because you basically have to like capture 3 flags. A mode like that on Orbital would be just fine. I think that we should have more options than Conquest in the beta, but there's all sorts of, god, there's like 4 maps launching smaller than Orbital. There's several of them that are bigger, which might be absurd, but then there's Portal mode. Then there's all sorts of little bitty like small player 48 modes and stuff that I think are going to play just fine and be just as fun. It's bizarre to me that they want smaller maps. Almost bizarre as the sentiment of Battlefield 5 was a perfect game, an underappreciated gem, really great according to Reddit. Yes, it was so great that nobody played it. It was so great that it bombed when it came out. It was so great that when it came out, RTX struggled to function because the technology was so incredibly new. The building destruction was glitchy and didn't really even work right. I'm going to tell you a story. I don't know if this is private or not, but like I did a capture session with this game where they got all the YouTubers in and we were supposed to like squad up and do the squads thing early and play Battlefield 5 a little bit early. Well, guess what? The friends list was broken. You couldn't do that. And well, the game would crash all the time, so we had to restart it like 6 times. And then you couldn't join the right squads because the squads would glitch out and it would have like ghost players taking up slots and stuff. And like half the stuff in the game didn't work, and we spent an hour or two trying to get it to work. And I remember in that time, Shroud was trying to stream or record or do whatever for his event because he was sponsored just like all the rest of us, and he was basically just streaming loops of crashes. And I don't know if this was on his stream or not, but he popped into the Discord in voice with the devs and just absolutely chewed them out. I have never seen a YouTuber or content creator talk to developers like that, telling them a variety of things about how their game is going to fail if it doesn't even play, or how the friends list isn't even going to work and this is a waste of his time and all this kind of, it was just downright savage, but it was the same thing everybody else was saying. And when the game came out, it was more of the same thing. It launched in a fundamentally broken state. Yeah, no, they patched it up, it fixed, it got better over time. The same thing they did with Battlefield 4. But it was nearly unplayable at launch, and it baffles me that people want to go back and play Battlefield 5. I see that as a sign of immaturity, of like super rose-colored glasses. And in another sense, the Battlefield community wants to recreate what they loved about their favorite game. The CoD community is the same, every gaming community is the same thing, but Battlefield can't be the same game that it was back in 2010. 2010 was a different time with different standards, different needs, different gamers. Call of Duty can't be the same thing that it was back in 2010 either. I'm in the CoD community. It's going through an existential crisis too, which is why Warzone exists. I believe that Activision created Warzone to try to modernize Call of Duty because it became very obvious to them that the yearly like hype release 6v6 multiplayer thing just wasn't working anymore. That's the same reason that DICE is trying new things with Battlefield, because releasing the same type of games that they released back in 2010 and even, you know, delaying them because of bugs and stuff, it's just not going to work anymore. They have to do something different. Call of Duty can't stay the same forever. Same reason Apex has been changing so much. Same reason I would say CSGO, but Valorant is just an improved, modified CSGO that absolutely killed it. I mean, it's doing great. So Battlefield has to evolve or die. And I think the community are largely acting like children about this. It's kind of pitiful. It actually makes me not want to play the game very much. And it's sad because, again, the game has real problems. The operators all looking the same is bizarre. The squad balancing isn't very good. There's real optimization issues going on here. There are things that the community should really be up DICE's butt about, and it should not be, oh, my assault rifle shoots at a normal bullet velocity instead of 120 meters per second like a crossbow or throwing throwing knife. I hate this. Oh my god, this little I can knee slide now? I don't, if I wanted to knee slide, I would play Apex Legends. That's pitiful. That's some just absolute crybaby stuff, and that's my opinion about this one. I'm sure the Battlefield community will hate me. I'm sure a lot of the COD community will hate me. I'm basically crying about other people crying, so I get the irony in that one. And it reminds me of a time when I was playing Battlefield 5 at launch, okay? It was not too long after I put my review video out. I was playing and somebody killed me, and the chat pops up and somebody says, "Hey, are you the real Drifter?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you know, I'm the real me." Dude said, "I just wanted to let you know that your videos are really well made and they're quality productions and all, but your opinions are bad." I don't think I've ever been more insulted in my life. I've never been more bamboozled about how to respond to this anti-compliment of everything you do is great, but your opinions are bad. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of that today, and that's just kind of okay because it's an opinion. And one of the things that we get to enjoy in the Western world is our opinions, spicy or otherwise. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.